Number 9. Dinosaur skeleton. The finding of dinosaur fossils of any kind isn't really a new thing. In fact, it's a very well-documented event that has set the stage for many people to go and try and find bones themselves, and even has become TV shows over the last few years. But for a boy and his father in Alberta, Canada, their desire to find bones led to quite a horde of discoveries, including a dinosaur skeleton. What happened was that this amateur archaeologist and his father went to a protected area and started digging around, legally, to try and find some bones. Not only did he find some, he found droves of them. They alerted the necessary authorities, and months later they were allowed to see the results of their find. I wasn't even excited, even though I know I should have been, Nathan Hrushkin told the BBC. I was in so much shock that I actually found a dinosaur discovery. The two's discovery was a life-changing event, and they were speechless over what they'd found. And again, these kinds of finds are a key part of archaeology, whether they be just pieces of bones or full-on dino skulls. There's something special, and in the case of Nathan, proof that they were meant to find these things, and that's amazing. What dinosaur fossil would you most like to dig up? A T-Rex, a giant Brontosaurus, maybe a Triceratops? If you could be lucky enough to find a complete fossil, which one would be your fantasy? Let me know in the comments below. Then be sure to subscribe to World List if you haven't already, because there are awesome new videos coming out all the time, and you probably don't want to miss them. Number 8. The Second Pyramid. For Egypt, the archaeological finds within its region are near limitless, simply because the sand and terrain have buried so many things over the centuries and millennia. By doing so, they've been preserved until they're rediscovered. Case in point, a discovery in 2017 of a new pyramid belonging to a dead pharaoh. It's a curious find because 60 years prior, in 1957, another pyramid was found, and it housed the very pharaoh that was named on the pyramid found in 2017. So it's kind of odd that a second pyramid would be attributed to him, right? The pharaoh himself was called Ameni-Kamau, and he was indeed laid to rest in a pyramid that was found in 1957. But not 2,000 feet away from that pyramid was another one that also bore his name. However, upon further looking into the pyramid, a box was found that had the name Hatshepsut on it, and that just so happens to be the name of his daughter. This led many to wonder if the pyramid was built for her, or at the very least was her burial chamber. However, no body of said princess was ever found. So what was the true purpose? Well, that's unclear, and that's what makes it all the more amazing that these mysteries keep piling up in terms of Egyptian finds. Could it have been some room of spiritual importance? Or maybe it was a storeroom that was full of treasure and was later looted. The possibilities here are kind of endless. Number 7. Yangguanzhou Ruins. Found in 2017 in Gaoling, Shanxi, China, these ruins are from a very prosperous period in the Yangshao culture, which existed from 5000 to 3000 BC. An important thing to note is the size of the ruins. The burial site within them is 915,000 square feet and contains over 2,000 graves, which is much bigger than most burial grounds of that time period by a large margin. That's a very important factor for various reasons. What this revealed was that the more standard kind of burial method that is used in the modern world today was starting to form around this period. It's also believed that the people of the Yangshao culture were learning and trading cultural notions with others who were in the realm that would have been China at the time. This is particularly evident between the people who lived in Guangzhou Plain and in western China during that time period, for example. Furthermore, with this knowledge in hand, certain mysteries of the history of China can also be solved. There were architectural mysteries that existed about the layout and structure of the civilization and their buildings that this now offers insight into. These are the kinds of discoveries that really get people excited because it helps shed light on a culture and a people and just how the world slowly started changing towards what we have now. Number 6. Sword in the Lake. There's an Arthurian legend that states that King Arthur gave his legendary sword Excalibur to the Lady in the Lake in order to keep it safe and fulfill his destiny. That sounds no doubt like the stuff we tell kids to make them dream big. But here's the thing, a sword honestly was found in a lake once, and it's a very old sword. You see, a young girl went to a lake during a vacation to relax and have some fun. As she was in the water, she stepped on something odd. When she pulled it up, it was an oddly shaped piece of metal. So naturally, she took it, and when she looked at it some more, she realized it was a sword. I picked it up and was gonna drop it back into the water, but it had a handle, and I saw that it was a little bit pointy at the end and all rusty, she told the local. I held it up in the air and said, "Daddy, I found a sword." After showing it to her parents, they took it to some experts, and they found out that the sword was actually 1,000 years old, might have been even older than that, which would mean it's actually older than the Vikings of that era. This in and of itself is relevant as it would help paint a picture of what was going on in this area in that time period, which could lead to more discoveries depending on what that fact could uncover. Not to mention it's gonna lead to a lot more people checking their lakes to see if they have certain artifacts lying around. Number 5. Kazakhstan Tomb Treasure. In 2018, a tomb in Kazakhstan was found, and within it was a massive treasure trove. The tomb itself was discovered within the GETAWAY Mountains, which is part of the country where it borders on the neighboring country of China. At one point in history, there were people who lived in this area known as the Saka. The Saka were nomadic, and they traveled over Europe and Asia for hundreds of years, and they were known as expert horsemen. And they had a really nice span of life before the Turkish invaders wiped them out in the 4th century. The tomb itself had thousands of golden treasures, and it's believed that these were remnants of some of the elite of the Saka tribe. And upon observation, it's clear they had really good skills with gold working. There were inscriptions, gold woven into animals, and jewels planted in golden bands found within the tomb itself. While it's not possible to age them exactly, archaeologists believe that they're at least 2,800 years old, based on the metalworking techniques believed to have made these. Truly an amazing find that tells much more about a people no longer on this earth. Number 4. Baghdad batteries. It's always fascinating when modern technologies are found to not be so modern, but just a new iteration on ancient technology, which is what is apparently true with the battery. This is not speculation though, as a site in what was Mesopotamia and now Iraq found a special jar that was believed to be an ancient form of battery. The jars were of terracotta, but the insides contained a copper rod and a spike, as well as asphalt cork at the top. But before it was sealed, the battery was said to be filled with an acidic liquid. Most believed it was either lemon or grape juice. The result was something that could indeed produce an electric charge. And many have gone back and forth to see what the use of such a battery was for, back in 250 BC to 250 AD when they were believed to have been made. It got so divisive that it actually ended up on the show Mythbusters. They tested whether it could be used for electroplating and found that it could indeed work. And then there was acupuncture, via using electric jolts to ease pain like in some modern practices, and it did work to an extent. And finally, given the times, they tested whether it would work as a religious experience. And all three were found to be plausible, but the catch was that a singular battery didn't have enough juice to really do much of anything, but put enough of them together and you did get results. Whether the Mythbusters or other scientists are right in their beliefs about the batteries is unclear, but one thing is very clear. These batteries were made for something. Did ancient people have a rudimentary form of electricity they used in their everyday lives? It definitely seems possible. Number 3. The Library of ASHURBANIPAL. Texts from the ancient world are rare, or worse, they're not in very good condition to learn from. So imagine the joy that archaeologists felt in 1850 when they found a hidden library in Kuryan-Sheikh, Iraq that held stories from long ago hidden within its tablets. The context here is that this library of clay tablets once belonged to Ashurbanipal, a man who once ruled an ancient kingdom, Assyria, from 660 BC to around 630 BC. So that alone made it a rare find. But also in the find was the fact that there were 30,000 writings within the library, which is an astonishing amount to find in an ancient library. Historical texts, administrative and legal documents, medical treatises, magical manuscripts, and literary works were all inside. In fact, one of the clay tablets told the legendary story of Gilgamesh, which is still considered one of the earliest surviving pieces of literature ever. Many of the pieces of this library can now be found in the Museum of Britain. Number 2. Neolithic mask. At first glance, the mask you see here appears to be nothing special. But there's more to this than meets the eye, for you see, this was a mask that was made around 9,000 years ago, during a part of the Neolithic era, making it a very rare and important part of history. Adding to the story, it was honestly found by accident in Israel. A man was walking through a field when he found the mask, and then handed it over to archaeological authorities to ensure it wasn't stolen by anyone. The man then led the archaeological team to the field where he found it, and it turned out there were many more Neolithic artifacts within the soil. But what was the mask for? While it's not exactly known, speculation says it was part of growing supernatural and religious tendencies. When we talk about the Neolithic period, we talk about the transition from a hunter-gatherer society to permanent settlements, one of the team said. People were starting to domesticate plants and animals. This was a time when the spiritual world was very strong. Either way, it was an amazing and accidental find that made many people very happy when they got to examine and study it. I would have loved to have been there when the team was excavating this incredible archaeological site. What about you? Number 1. Tunnel with paintings. A 17th century tunnel was found near the city of Ecatepec in Mexico in November of 2019, and it was decorated with paintings that are distinctly pre-Hispanic. This potentially means that this came from certain Native American people who lived in the area before being conquered by the Spanish. The tunnel itself is believed to be a dike, or a floodgate that would let water through for the area. As for the paintings that adorned part of the tunnel, they were done by sculpting an image and then painting it with limestone, which was one of the preferred methods of the petroglyphs of the area. Some of the paintings that have been documented include a chimale, or war shield, a flint point, and the head of a bird of prey, while the stucco reliefs resemble raindrops. And another spot on the tunnel had a temple being depicted via the petroglyphs. The tunnel is still being researched, but this could lead to more clues about the time period the tunnel was made in, the people who lived there, and why certain structures like the tunnel were crafted in the first place. Number 10. Vampire bugs. This is an insect that you should never touch. However, it might not actually be up to you. I'm talking about vampire bugs, also known as kissing bugs. These blood-sucking insects are typically found in the warm climates of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But according to the CDC, they're invading the United States of America. As of 2019, the kissing bug has spread to at least 29 states, and this is straight from the CDC themselves. But at this point, you're probably wondering what's the big deal about a kissing bug? It sounds innocent enough, romantic even, right? Oh, so cute, a kissing bug, but no! It actually isn't very innocent at all. The kissing bug got its name because it tends to bite people on their face and particularly around their lips. And they usually do it while you're sleeping. They should be called the no consent bug instead, the creeps. The big issue with these creatures is that they're able to transmit a parasitic disease called Chagas disease, and this can lead to gastrointestinal problems and cardiovascular complications. If you see one of these strange bugs, which kind of look like typical wood-eating beetles you would find in a forest, try not to touch them. You can carry them inside with you, and when you're not looking, they'll suck the blood from your lips and give you diseases. Super gross. Number 9. Pussmouth. The pussmouth caterpillar looks like something you would want to put in a jar and take home with you. These bugs are fuzzy and something about them just screams to be touched. However, you should seriously think twice before ever touching a pussmoth caterpillar. They're one of the all-time greatest toxic caterpillars in all of North America. You can find these things all over the southern US, hanging out in the shade of trees, often around homes and schools. Their population peaks in the late spring and the late fall, and you can recognize them because of their long and oddly silky hair. They almost look like tufts of fur. The big danger behind the puss moth caterpillar is that if it rubs against your skin, it can embed venomous hairs into your flesh. And when this happens, you'll know pretty much right away. You'll have an intense throbbing pain, serious burning, and probably a rash. It is unlikely that you would die, but anything is possible when you touch the puss moth caterpillar, so don't even really think about it. In fact, don't touch any caterpillars at all if you find them outside. My neighbor was pruning some trees and a caterpillar fell into his eye. He was blind in that eye for quite a long time and ended up with permanent damage, so I'm not even really joking here. What about you? Have you touched a caterpillar? Anyone have a bad experience with one? Definitely let me know in the comments below. And if you want to learn about more creepy critters, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. Number 8. The hooded pitahui. The hooded pitahui is one of the only venomous birds in the world. While there isn't really much chance of you reaching out and accidentally touching any bird, unless maybe it's a chick and you're standing in a chicken pen, it's still worth knowing about this mysterious avian creature. First, they don't live in North America. They live mainly in the rainforests and tropical jungles of New Guinea. So actually, you probably have about zero chance of ever running into one. And that's a good thing too. The hooded pitahui is the first ever poisonous bird to be documented officially in any kind of scientific literature. There have been myths in the past about these kinds of birds, but this is the first one that has been documented. Some things to know. The bird is bright and gorgeous. It emits a very strange odor, and it's venomous because of its diet. The bird eats berries and insects, and many of the beetles that it eats are toxic. These toxic beetles then pass their poisonous properties into the bird, which itself becomes a vessel for toxicity. This is definitely not a bird you want pooping on your head. Not that you'd really want any bird pooping on your head, probably. Number 7. African crested rat. I might not need to warn anyone about this next creature, but I'm going to anyways. It's not like anyone is chasing rats down subway tunnels trying to pet them. Rats are arguably the most hated animal in any city on Earth, except maybe cockroaches, and depending on where you live, maybe also raccoons. But there is one type of rat that you really need to stay away from. It's called the African crested rat, and it can poison you. The African crested rat has been discovered to chew the root of a very toxic tree, creating a sort of toxic paste in its mouth. It then takes the lethal mixture and licks its fur to make itself poisonous. According to an in-depth news report from the BBC, any animal that tries to attack the African crested rat is going to get a mouthful of very deadly poison. What's really interesting about this is that never before has this type of behavior been seen in a mammal. A researcher from the University of Oxford has said that this is one of the most extraordinary defenses of any animal living on Earth today. And so the lesson here is to never touch the African crested rat. And if for whatever reason you do, be sure you don't stick your hand in your mouth. Number 6. Macaws. Anyone who has visited Thailand, India, Cambodia, or any of the surrounding countries has probably at least one experience with a macaw. These are arguably the worst monkeys in the entire world. This is especially true in places like India and Thailand, where a constant flow of tourists has provided the monkeys with food and attention. But by absolutely no measure should you ever try and touch one of these savage little beasts. They are the absolute worst, and a single bite from even a small macaw can send you to the hospital needing to get tetanus shots and even rabies shots. A new story out of Thailand shows just how bad these evil little monkeys can be. This ancient Thai city is literally overrun by monkeys, and most of them are whacked out of their minds on sugary junk food. Their population is also growing out of control. Witnesses inside the city claim that the excrement from the monkeys is everywhere, causing an unbearable smell in the wet season when it rains. Plus, the monkey menace is positively fearless, ruling the streets with their hairy monkey paws. And as a foreign tourist, these animals might look cute, but if you were to try and touch one, you might end up with an eye missing, or your phone gone, or with a monkey drinking all of your beer. Number 5. Black widow spider. The black widow spider is not the most dangerous spider in the world, but it's definitely not something you want crawling across your hand. If you live in North America, especially in the northern parts, you don't really have too much to worry about dangerous spiders. The only one around is the black widow, and while its bite is not usually fatal, the pain is not something you probably want to deal with. According to poison.org, the bite from a black widow spider is painful immediately. Not only is there pain, but there's severe pain. Your muscles can cramp, and sometimes you might even need anti-venom so you don't suffer more than necessary. The good news is that the black widow spider is very easy to spot. Even if you're a weirdo who likes going out in the garden and playing with spiders, you should probably be able to identify the black widow immediately by its round abdominal section and the red hourglass markings on its butt. When you see it, do not touch it. Number 4. Moray eels. If you're the kind of adventurous person who likes sticking on a scuba suit and swimming around in the water, you're probably the kind of person who would touch a strange sea animal. While some marine creatures aren't harmful at all, some are better left alone. In particular, the moray eel is something you should not only never touch, but that you should never put your hand anywhere near. These are the largest of the eel species, and they're horrifying. The biggest problem with bumping into a moray eel while scuba diving or snorkeling is that they're basically blind. They aren't very aggressive, but they can't see very well. This means that even if the moray eel doesn't want to attack you, if you put your hand anywhere near this sea serpent's mouth, it's going to bite anyways, and that's one painful bite. You will need to get medical attention very quickly, as the bite from a moray eel can cause a very dangerous infection. According to some people who have been bitten by the fish, the moray eel delivers one of the most painful bites of any fish in the ocean. Experts believe this is because of the pullback pattern, or the way the fish's teeth are arranged inside of its mouth. When it bites, it also rips. The moray eel has a secondary set of jaws, kinda like the monsters from the Alien movies actually. When it bites, you can bet it's gonna hurt. Number 3. Sea urchins. There are species of sea urchins in every ocean on the planet, from the hottest tropical waters to the most frigid Arctic waters. While at first glance an urchin might seem like an inanimate object you could pick up and take home with you, you should by no means ever touch one of these sea creatures. First, they're not inanimate objects. They look like spiky rocks, but sea urchins are living. They eat organic matter on the floor of the sea. They have a mouth at the bottom of their shell, and their anus is at the top of the shell. So if you ever pick up a sea urchin, you might accidentally stick your thumb in its butt. As if you needed another reason not to touch a sea urchin, you could also be stabbed by them. Sea urchins are covered in spines and are sharp enough to penetrate your boots, your wetsuit, and definitely your skin. The spines are made of the same sort of calcium carbonate that makes up eggshells. However, the spines on the sea urchin are hollow, almost like needles. They can easily stick through your skin and cause an aggressive amount of pain. Depending on what type of sea urchin you were silly enough to pick up and how many spines punctured your skin, you could be in for a brief spell of pain, or you could be rolling around on the sand screaming for hours with partial paralysis. Number 2. Sea wasp. Nobody would ever advise anybody to touch a jellyfish. This is especially true if you don't know one jellyfish from another. They're not all dangerous, but the ones that are dangerous are way too dangerous to play around with. The most venomous of all the jellyfish is the box jellyfish. But out of all the various species of box jellyfish, the sea wasp is the worst of them all. The sea wasp has venom so potent and so powerful that in some cases it can kill a human in just 3 minutes. The sea wasp may have a small body, but it has roughly 60 tentacles that reach about 10 feet. Each of the tentacles is covered with unique stinging cells that can zap you multiple times before you even realize what's going on. As a general rule of thumb, keep your hands and feet away from any translucent jelly-like creature that's swimming in the ocean. And if you see a sea wasp, swim away very quickly. Number 1. Tigers. Touching a tiger is not a good idea. Even if you find yourself in some exotic place where they have seemingly docile tigers roaming around that you can touch, you still may want to think twice. While most of the time nothing bad will happen in a tiger sanctuary with trained professionals, every now and again something does go wrong. Just a couple years ago, while on a trip to Thailand, a British university student decided to touch a young tiger at an extremely popular tourist attraction. The tiger that she touched was quite small, but then a giant 400-pound tiger came out of nowhere and bit her on the leg. Workers from the tiger temple quickly jumped in and got between her and the apparently hungry animal, and she was quickly dragged to safety. However, it took over 8 weeks for her to recover from being mauled by the giant cat. Even after returning home to North Yorkshire, the Daily Mail reported that she could still not walk without aid. The doctors said her scars from the incident would likely never heal. The point is that you probably shouldn't touch tigers of any kind in any setting, whether it seems safe or not. Number 10. Don't pee on crocodiles. It's one thing to visit a crocodile lagoon and try to ride on the back of a giant reptile. I mean, that's pretty dumb, but it happens so often that you kind of expect it. What's truly dumb is to go to a lagoon in Mexico known to be crawling with crocodiles, stand on the edge of the water, drop your pants, and then do your business. This is what happened just recently in Cancun at the Ni Xipte Lagoon. It's one of the biggest tourist hotspots in Mexico, and it was most recently the site of a serious crocodile attack. It all started when the stupid tourist pulled down his pants and decided to relieve himself. As he urinated into the lagoon, a crocodile was watching. And I don't know if you know this, but it's probably never a good idea to pee on a crocodile. They just don't like it. And as reported by the New York Post, the crocodile leapt out of the water, clamped its jaws around the guy's arm just as he was in the middle of peeing, and chomped his forearm clean off at the elbow. I mean, it doesn't really get much more gruesome than that. The guy apparently struggled with the enormous beast briefly, then managed to escape and run away minus one of his arms. An ambulance quickly rushed the guy to the local hospital, where he had an emergency surgery done. As of the time of the report, the man was still in critical condition and fighting for his life. The lagoon where he decided to relieve himself is known to be infested with crocodiles, with some of the animals reaching at least 10 feet in length. Number 9. Gender reveal fail. If you search gender reveal fails, you'll find hundreds of hilarious videos, but one gender reveal fail was a bit more disastrous than the rest. Also, this should be a lesson to people to just chill it on the gender reveal drama and just keep your business to yourself. In September of 2020, a pyrotechnic device at a gender reveal party set off a wildfire in California that burned over 8,600 acres. These lunatics at the gender reveal used some kind of smoke-generating device, which started a fire in the San Bernardino County. The fire began in the El Dorado Ranch Park and then spread immediately north, according to the fire department. The fire quickly grew and grew until it was a raging forest fire with only 7% of it contained. But the really hilarious part is the actual video of the party. You can see the couple, you can see some kids walking around the edge of the park, and you can see somebody leaning down to light the device. Moments later, you can clearly see everyone in the park screaming and running away in a fury of chaos as the flames suddenly raged out of control. Nobody has died from the event, but hopefully this was a lesson to the people who decided they needed a pyrotechnic device to tell everyone the gender of their baby. Newsflash? Nobody cares. Number 8. Snakes are not a toy. It's true what they say. People tend to learn the hard way. Nothing could be a better example of this statement than the fools who think snakes are toys. There are plenty of incidences in Florida every year where people get bitten by poisonous snakes. And according to the lieutenant of the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Venom Response Team, it's almost never accidental. This is because people treat snakes like toys. One of the most ridiculous cases of extremely dumb people playing with snakes is that of an 18-year-old man living in Tampa who caught a water moccasin, also known as a cottonmouth. Rather than run away from the snake like any normal human's instincts would scream for them to do, this guy took the snake home and put it in a pillowcase and stuffed it under his bed. According to a report from the Sun-Sentinel, the young man was so fond of his newly captured snake that he tried to kiss it on the face. And obviously, the snake wasn't really into him. Rather than accepting his kisses, the snake bit him on the face. The guy was then hospitalized, and the State Wildlife Commission had to open an investigation. The kid never died, at least not yet, but hopefully he learned his lesson, because snakes are not toys. Number 7. Extermination disaster. They do say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You might say that's exactly what happened when a man burned down his parents' home, killed 3 pets, and ruined his own life, all because he wanted to exterminate some ants. It all started with good intentions. The guy was clearly stupid, but at least he wanted to do something good. He was trying to get rid of ants by burning them when he instead burned down the entire house. According to the report from the New York Daily News, the guy was sitting in his basement, flicking lit matches at ants, thinking that he could burn them all away. You might be thinking this makes sense for a young kid, maybe 10 or 12 years old, but this guy was actually 21 years old at the time. Well, you know what happened next. He flicked a match at an ant, it lit something on fire, the fire spread quickly, and suddenly the guy was running out of the house while it roared in flames. The young man was treated for smoke inhalation and burns after he was discovered carrying his favorite items outside of the home. 2 cats perished and 1 dog died, which makes you really wonder why he was carrying objects out of the house and not the living animals. But in any case, the house was trashed, and the guy's parents were probably real angry when they got back home. And now for number 6, but first, remember to make sure to let me know who you think the dumbest person was on this list. And if you want to, be sure to share the dumbest thing you've ever done, no pressure. But also remember to hit the subscribe button and join World List, because we're here for your entertainment, and we don't want you to miss out on anything. Number 6, gas station spider fire. This next story is equally as ridiculous as the last one, but at least most of us can probably sympathize with the guy who started a fire trying to kill a spider. We all hate spiders, and some of us hate spiders a little more than others. Sometimes when a person sees a spider, they freak out, scream, and flail around like a crazy person. You might reach for a roll of newspaper or a nearby shoe or whatever else is handy. But at a Michigan gas station in September, a guy pulled into the gas station, hooked his car up to the pump, and was in the middle of filling his tank when he saw a spider on his vehicle. Rather than smack it with his hand or just ignore it, the man pulled out his lighter and tried to burn the spider. And this is obviously the first sign of a psychotic serial killer, and the guy should probably be locked up to prevent any future murders, because anyone whose first instinct is to burn something alive, Well, they probably have something seriously wrong in their brain. But in any case, when he tried to light the spider on fire, he ended up lighting everything else on fire instead. According to the gas station clerk who had been present at the time, fire first burst from the guy's gas tank and then spread to the pump next to him. The gas station clerk slapped the emergency pump shutoff button and then phoned the fire department. The guy pulled his vehicle out of the way, grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher, and put the fire out. In the end, everything was okay. Surprisingly, the guy did the right thing by putting out the fire and not just running away, but that doesn't make him any less dumb for starting it in the first place. Number 5. Electric scooter getaway. There are a lot of vehicles you might want to choose to get away from the police. Theoretically, if you were being chased by the police, you would want a fast car, maybe a 4x4 vehicle or something that at least goes faster than an electric scooter. But in Melbourne, Australia, witnesses were shocked when a man on an electric scooter refused to pull over when the police tried to flag him down, and instead tried to escape. As you can imagine, the guy didn't get far on his electric scooter. After all, it wasn't even a motorbike. In the end, the guy actually ended up falling off his electric scooter, then scurrying away from the police on foot. You really have to wonder what's going on in somebody's brain when something like this happens. In case you were wondering, this wasn't even the kind of electric scooter you could sit on. It's one of those electric scooters you have to stand on. The guy tried to get away by standing on the scooter only to fall down on the side of the road and hit his head. The police, of course, caught up with him, but it's undetermined as of now if he was charged with anything or what kind of crime this dum-dum was trying to get away with. Number 4. Bull run selfie. Running with the bulls is one of those bizarre things that is still happening even though it's 2020. Release a bunch of bulls and then let a whole horde of morons try to run away from them. And while you would have to be either brave or stupid to partake in this event at all, one guy in Pamplona took it to a whole new level of ridiculous when he stopped in the middle of running to try and take a selfie with a bull. Luckily, the guy wasn't injured, and quite frankly, it was a miracle he didn't get gored by the bull. During the 8 days of running, at least 42 people were taken to hospital, including 3 foreigners. But the selfie man escaped injury and ran away. He's now wanted by the police, who wish to fine him around $4,000 for putting himself in danger while running with the bulls. It's part of a new city rule trying to make the globally famous bull running safer for the people who want to join it. But quite frankly, the man and the rule are both kind of equally dumb in my books. Imagine fining people for being careless in an event put on by a city in which wild animals charge at them through the streets. The whole affair is preposterous, and I kind of hope the guy gets away without having to pay the fine. Number 3. Toddler driver. This next story is not only stupid, it's also despicable. A man in Connecticut was brought into police custody after he abandoned his 2-year-old daughter alone in his idling vehicle while he went to take care of his own business. While everyone with any kind of parenting sense knows that you don't leave a toddler alone in a vehicle, whether it's cold, hot, or otherwise, this guy obviously didn't get the memo. To make matters worse, the young girl managed to put the vehicle into drive, smashing it into several parked cars. The local authorities said that the child managed to strike 2 other vehicles, causing slight damage to all 3 cars. The father was taken into custody, where he was held on a $15,000 bond. He was charged with risk of injury to a minor, and the State Department of Children and Families was then notified, and the girl was placed into the care of her uncle. It's currently unknown whether the man will retain custody of the child or if she will be put into some kind of protective care. Either way, the guy was obviously a complete idiot. Number 2. Texting in a lake. There's nothing quite like instant karma to make you giggle. A recent story recounts the tale of a woman in Maryland who drove her car straight into a lake while texting. Most places have texting laws out now, making it illegal for you to use your phone while driving, but this lady obviously didn't care. The woman was only 25 years old, and she'd been driving along the St. Charles Parkway while staring at her cell phone when she lost control of the vehicle, smashing straight into a tree, then flipped the car about 60 feet into Waldorf Lake. Amazingly, the woman managed to look away from her phone long enough to escape through a window while the car sank. She also miraculously walked away without a single injury. Nonetheless, officials say she was escorted to the nearest hospital for treatment. The local sheriff's office also told the press that charges at the time were pending. To be honest, I hope she gets a big fat fine and a big fat increase in her insurance premiums, though I'm sure both of those things happened. Number 1. Soy sauce overdose. Our last story today is a man who had one of the weirdest overdoses ever. It didn't happen because of illegal drugs, it didn't happen because of too much booze, and it didn't happen because of a mistake with medication. This overdose happened when a young man guzzled a full quart of soy sauce and went into a coma. He then almost died from having way too much salt in his body. According to Live Science, the young guy drank the soy sauce because of a dare. Live Science also reported that the boy was the first person ever to have deliberately overdosed on salt and survived with no lasting neurological problems. In fact, his case was so strange that it was published in the Journal of Emergency Medicine. That, in and of itself, is quite the feat, as not everybody can have their weird medical case published in a journal. What actually happened to the guy was something called hypernatremia, which is basically too much salt in the blood. This condition is usually seen by people who have some kind of psychiatric condition that causes them to eat condiments. And this is an extremely dangerous thing because all the salt in the blood causes the brain to lose water, which then causes the brain to shrink and bleed. The man actually began to twitch and have a seizure after drinking the soy sauce, at which time his friends hurried him to the emergency room. He remained in a coma for 3 full days before waking up. Number 10. The 2-week reprieve. This is the story of Walter Williams, a 78-year-old man from Mississippi who had a very simple kind of death. He passed away, was checked by the medical examiner, and was later put into a body bag and then taken to the local funeral home, processed for the funeral and a ceremony. Here's the problem though, he didn't even make it to his own funeral, because by the time he got to the embalmer's room, which is used to make the body both rigid and preserved for some time, the person there noticed that Walter's legs were moving. The coroner was, needless to say, stunned and proceeded to pay close attention to what was going on. Walter then started to breathe. He was actually still alive. Yes, indeed, he was alive somehow. Think about this for a moment if you would. Not only did his death fool some people, it fooled a lot of them, including the more than likely medical personnel who declared him dead. Then he somehow survived being put in a body bag and being transported without suffocating, only to miraculously be woken up by some sort of stimuli. That's a lot of things that have to go right or wrong for you to be presumed dead and yet not killed before being brought to your own funeral. Unfortunately for Walter, it wasn't meant to be. Just over 2 weeks later, he passed away for real. The family double-checked. "I think he's gone this time," confirmed his nephew. Number 9. The case of mistaken identity. When you go to a funeral, you should know 100% that the person you're burying is your loved one or friend, right? In fact, you've likely gone to see the body of your lost one at least once before the funeral for proper identification. However, in the case of one Gilberto Araújo of Brazil, things weren't as simple as they would have appeared. You see, he had been believed to have been killed during a violent attack at his workplace, and his brother had come around to identify Gilberto as the deceased. So thus a funeral was made, and all the family came to mourn the body and so on and so forth. But then, Gilberto arrived at the door and was wondering why all of them were mourning him when he was still very much alive. Confused? Yeah, me too. So here's what happened. Gilberto worked at a car wash, and at the car wash, someone was killed, and that person just so happened to look a lot like him. No, really. And that's why the brother thought Gilberto was dead. Though you honestly have to question whether he was close to his brother, because you'd think that he would recognize that the man killed was nothing more than a look-alike, but I guess not. And now for number 8. But first, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more videos. And let me know if you would ever fake your own funeral in the comments below. Number 8. A hit gone sideways. This particular story is definitely one of the more unique funeral tales you're ever going to hear, and for good reason. Noella Rakundo was from Australia, and one day she had to go and make a trip to a funeral for her stepmother. No, her stepmother wasn't alive, but if things had gone as planned, neither would Noella be soon. You see, her husband had decided to kill her, but since he couldn't do it himself, he went and hired a hitman to do it for him. Sure enough, they grabbed her while she was at the location of her stepmother's funeral. So that's the end of the story, right? Well, not so fast, because apparently these were hitmen with integrity. And by that I mean that they eventually figured out that the guy who hired them was Noella's husband, and they weren't really on board for killing her for him, so they let Noella go. So that's the end of the story then, right? Nope. Because her husband, thinking the deed had been done, set up a funeral for her to mourn and try to show that he was sad about her passing. Unfortunately for him, she showed up and confronted him about the attempted murder in front of everyone. As a result, he was later sentenced to 9 years in jail, and I'm pretty sure they got a divorce. Number 7. See Who Would Come Part 1. To many, funerals are a sad time, but to others, in various cultures, funerals are a measure of the impact you made in your life. Because the more people that arrive at your funeral, the more people you impacted while you were alive. For Chinese man Zheng Diang, he wondered how much he had impacted people in his 66 years of life so far, so he went and staged his own funeral. Now, before you just go and blast him for his vanity, there's more going on here than just that. In Chinese culture, the dead are said to have needs, and their graves are supposed to be visited regularly to ensure those needs are met. So he wanted to make sure those needs were met via the people who would come to his funeral. And on the bright side for him, 40 people he invited to the funeral did show up, as well as hundreds of other people who wanted to pay tribute to the deceased. However, there was a problem in who didn't appear at the funeral. 20 relatives and friends didn't show up. "I can't believe so many relatives and friends don't care about me," he was quoted as saying. It is a little sad, but since he was still alive, he could now haunt them in a very personal way to ensure they did come the next time around. Number 6. See Who Would Come Part 2. If you think that only a few people stage their own funerals to see who all would come, well, you'd be wrong. Because a Serbian man named Vuk Peric decided to do his own fake funeral to see who would show up. More than likely, it was a closed casket affair, and he decided to watch the entire funeral from a distance, which is a curious thing for sure. When he felt that the proceedings went on long enough, he went down and thanked everyone who had mourned him. I think that after the shock wore off that he was alive, they probably weren't too pleased that they'd been messed with like that. Would you want to be told someone you cared for was dead and then have them show up to thank you for coming and mourning them? Yeah, exactly. Number 5. Death becomes a holiday. This very unique story comes from the village of Braffin in Hertfordshire, England, and it dates all the way back to 1571. A local farmer by the name of Matthew Wall had passed away and the whole village came together to mourn him as you'd expect. However, there was a slight problem. You see, as the casket was being carried out to the burial site, one of the pallbearers went and dropped the coffin, which obviously would have been a big deal on its own because of the sanctity of it all. However, when the coffin dropped and the body fell out, Wall woke up and was naturally surprised by what was going on. Now, you might think that the village would be rightfully frightened by this resurrection story, and maybe they were in their own way. But not long after, they created their own holiday called Old Man's Day to celebrate the revival of Matthew Wall, a man who, by the way, continued to live until 1595, proving that death really didn't have his number for quite some time. Number 4. The Bishop. Nikiforos Glykas was a bishop working in Greece, and as you might expect upon his passing, his church had many particular and specific methods that they would impart on the fallen to make sure he had a proper burial. For example, in the case of a death, the body was left out to be displayed and mourned by the fall. This event was to go on for 2 days, and on the second day, everyone in the church was in for a shock when the bishop woke up and started to demand to know what was going on around him. As it would turn out, he was just napping for days apparently. This happened in 1896, so I guess the 1800s were just a really weird time. Number 3. How not to show up at your own funeral. There are certain pieces of etiquette that are to be followed when going to a funeral of any kind. One of which is to not be drunk or be high on various narcotics. But does that pertain to a person who is dead? Edison Vicuna would no doubt argue no. You see, he went missing in his home country of Ecuador, and after he didn't report in for days, his family felt that he was dead. Then a body was found, but the face was horribly disfigured because it was in a car accident previously. An autopsy was done, and it was found out that it was Edison. Hearing this, the family went and threw a funeral for him. But the joke, and it was a bad one, was on them, because as the funeral took place, Edison showed up to the funeral flat out drunk. Naturally, people were freaked out because of what was going on, but eventually, they re-examined the dead body and realized that it wasn't Edison, though Edison showing up probably was the better indication of that. Number 2. Death, life, and death again. You could argue that Fagilyu Mukhametsuyunov of Russia has one of the worst return-to-life stories ever, because in 2011 she was believed to have died from a heart attack. She was taken to a hospital where she was declared dead. As such, a funeral was made a few days later, and as she was laying in her coffin, she woke up. And to her surprise and horror, there were people all around her mourning her. This caused her to panic and start yelling. She was taken to the hospital after people realized what was going on, but even though she was still alive, it didn't take. As her husband recalled, her eyes flapped. However, she just lived an additional 12 minutes in intensive care prior to dying once more, and this time permanently. Heart failure was ultimately registered as the cause of death, and it's important to remember that this was modern medical practices that had labeled her dead. And this shows that even modern medicine can fail in understanding the human body. Number 1. Waiter, this man is still alive. Another more recent death story happened in 2012. when waiter Hamdi Hafez Al-Nubi had a heart attack at just 28 years old. A very odd thing, but after being examined, he was declared dead and his family started to prepare the body for its last rites via Islamic traditions. One problem: when the body, after being prepared, was sent to the medical examiner for a final check and death certificate signing, he noticed that the body was still warm, which shouldn't have been possible, as the human body loses heat after death and thus it should have been cold. After realizing that the man was still alive, he alerted the family, and instead of a funeral, they had a celebration, which, if I'm being honest here, was probably a much better gathering to have, all things considered. Thanks for watching. What did you think of this one? Were you shocked by some of these stories? Which ones were you shocked by the most? Can you believe how many times people were declared dead and yet they weren't? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to World List, and I'll see you next time on the channel.